3 months ago, I was a 34-year-old security guard working the night shift in downtown Los Angeles. My life had already burned down to ashes long before that night began. My name is Bradley Hutchinson, and at the time, I was making $18 an hour, barely enough to survive, much less rebuild the life I'd lost. Before everything fell apart, I used to be an accounts manager at a firm in Century City. I wore pressed suits, attended team lunches, and pretended to be one of the people who had it all figured out. But that was before my marriage exploded, before my ex-wife, Natalie Prescott, and her powerful father stripped me of everything that mattered. Natalie's father, Donald Prescott, was one of those men whose name carried more weight than the law. He owned half the commercial real estate along the coast. When he smiled, judges leaned forward. When he frowned, careers ended. Unfortunately, I'd married into that world thinking love would shield me from the ugliness of money. I was wrong. After I caught Natalie in the home gym with her trainer, everything unraveled faster than I could react. Her father unleashed a legal hurricane, lawyers who billed more per hour than I earned in a week, investigators who twisted every text and every argument into evidence that I was unstable, controlling, even abusive. The judge, one of Donald's golfing buddies, didn't hesitate to side with her. I lost the house, custody of our twin boys, and whatever reputation I had left. Natalie's last words to me outside the courthouse still replay sometimes, like a curse burned into my memory. "You'll die broken alone, Bradley. Just like your father. The boys will forget you even existed." I told myself I didn't care, but I did. God, I did. Now I spent my nights behind the curved front desk at Meridian Tower, a 40-story skyscraper of glass and steel reaching up into the LA skyline. It was the kind of building I used to visit for meetings, not guard at 3 a.m. My job was simple: watch the cameras, sign in cleaning staff, stay awake. The fluorescent lights hummed that high-pitched tone that slowly eats through your sanity. The air conditioning made the marble floor cold enough to bite through my shoes. The only sound came from the faint buzz of traffic outside, and occasionally the elevator ding when the cleaning crew switched floors. My polyester uniform itched at the collar. The badge pinned to my chest, B. Hutchinson Security, was scratched from the time Mason, my oldest boy, had played with it during one of our McDonald's visits. Those nights were my lifeline. Every Tuesday and Thursday I got exactly 4 hours with my boys. Natalie's driver always dropped them off 15 minutes late, just to remind me who had the power. But when Mason and Tyler ran toward me shouting, "Dad!" across the parking lot, I could almost pretend everything was normal again. We'd sit in the play area, the boys laughing over Happy Meals, me trying to memorize every moment before Natalie's driver would return. For those brief 4 hours, the world made sense again. Then it would all vanish when they left, like someone switching off the only light in a dark room. My apartment in Koreatown was barely 400 square feet, a Murphy bed that squeaked when I pulled it down, a thrift store couch with one broken leg, and a TV that only caught local stations. Rent was $1,400 a month, leaving just enough for gas and instant noodles. I'd learned which stores discounted their meat after 7 p.m., and which gas stations didn't pre-authorize cards for $20. Still, I told myself it was temporary, that one day I'd crawl back out of this hole. But deep down, I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. That night, October 15th, a little past 2:45 a.m., was supposed to be like every other shift. I was rereading the same page of a cheap paperback thriller, my coffee long gone cold, when the lobby doors burst open with a sound like thunder. An elderly man stumbled in, clutching his chest. His suit, charcoal gray, tailored perfectly, looked like it cost more than my car. His hair was silver and immaculately combed, even as his body swayed with weakness. "Help," he gasped, the word echoing across the marble floor. I jumped to my feet, spilling my coffee across the desk, and ran toward him. He was already collapsing by the time I reached him, his legs folding like paper. I caught him under the arms, lowering him gently to the floor. His skin was pale, his breath shallow. "Sir, can you hear me?" I said, grabbing my phone and dialing 911. His eyes met mine, clear blue, startlingly intense, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to freeze. You he whispered hoarsely. "You look exactly like her." Who was her? And why did a dying stranger see my mother's face when he looked at me? The man's hand clutched my sleeve, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who looked so fragile. His breathing came in quick, shallow bursts. I could smell the faint scent of expensive cologne under the tang of hospital disinfectant that clung to him. "Hold on, sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I pressed the phone against my ear. "Help is on the way." The 911 operator's voice filled my ear. "What's your emergency?" "I have an elderly man at Meridian Tower. Possible heart attack," I said, forcing calm into my words. "He's conscious but fading fast." "Paramedics are en route," the operator replied. "Stay on the line," but I couldn't focus on her words anymore. The man, this stranger in a $5,000 suit, was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. His blue eyes were sharp, desperate, and full of recognition I couldn't explain. "Tell me," he wheezed, "your name." "Bradley." "Bradley Hutchinson." His breath rattled in his chest. "Your mother." "Her name?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Dorothy," I answered automatically. "Dorothy Roberts." "Why?" His hand trembled violently, his eyes glistening with tears. "Dorothy." "Mills," he gasped. My blood ran cold. "What did you just say?" "Dorothy Mills," he repeated, voice cracking. "My daughter." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "That's impossible." "My mom told me her parents died before I was born." The man tried to speak again, but the words collapsed into silence. His mouth opened, his lips forming shapes that sound refused to follow. Then he exhaled one final whisper, barely audible. "Grandson." The paramedics burst through the glass doors before I could even process what I'd heard. They moved like a rehearsed symphony. Oxygen mask, IV line, vitals check, gurney straps. One of them, a young woman with her hair tied tight, looked up at me. "You family?" she asked briskly. I hesitated. "I don't know," she frowned but didn't press. "We're taking him to Cedars-Sinai." And just like that, they were gone, wheeling him through the glass doors, disappearing into flashing red lights. The lobby fell silent again, the way it always did after chaos left. But now that silence felt heavier. I stared at the spilled coffee on the marble floor, my reflection rippling in the brown puddle. Dorothy Mills was my daughter. The words replayed in my head on a loop, each time louder, sharper. My mother's maiden name, he'd known it. How could that be a coincidence? I called my supervisor, Hector Ramirez, to file the report, but the words tumbled out awkwardly. "Some old guy just collapsed in the lobby. Said something crazy before the ambulance took him." Hector grunted on the other end. "You okay?" "Yeah, just weird night. Write it up and go home early if you need." "You sound shaken." I thanked him, hung up, and sat staring at the monitors. Every hallway on the screen was still, the building's quietness pressing against me like a weight. My mother's story about her parents had never changed. They'd died in a car crash before I was born. She'd said it gently, with tears in her eyes, the way you talk about something that hurts too much to revisit. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? But now, an old man with eyes like mine was lying in a hospital somewhere calling me grandson. The next few days passed in a haze. I went through my shifts like a machine, barely sleeping, barely eating. I told myself he'd been confused, delirious from oxygen loss. Elderly patients often said strange things. That's what I wanted to believe. But I couldn't ignore the image burned into my mind. His face pale and drawn, those desperate blue eyes fixed on mine. By the third night, curiosity finally drowned my denial. On my break, I pulled out my phone and searched Theodore Ashford. Dozens of results filled the screen. News articles, business profiles, Forbes features. Theodore H. Ashford, founder and CEO of Ashford Industries, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies on the West Coast. Estimated net worth $2.8 billion. Widower, no surviving children. My stomach twisted. No surviving children. But he'd said he was my grandfather. Was it possible? Had my mother hidden something this huge from me? 3 mornings later, as I tried to sleep before another shift, my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code 310 meant Beverly Hills. "Mr. Hutchinson?" The voice on the other end was smooth, professional. "My name is Lawrence Whitmore, senior partner at Whitmore, Ashford & Associates. I represent Mr. Theodore Ashford." He's asked to see you personally. I sat upright in bed, heart pounding. He's alive? Yes, but his condition is delicate. He insists it's urgent. When? Today, 2 o'clock. Our offices are at 2575 Wilshire Boulevard, Suite 1200. I have work, I said instinctively. Mr. Hutchinson, Lawrence replied gently. Mr. Ashford has made it clear this matter is of the highest importance. He'll compensate you for any lost wages. I stared at the wall. Billionaire's lawyer was calling me, and I was worried about losing an 18-an-hour shift. Okay, I said finally. I'll be there. If a dying billionaire really believed I was his grandson, what would he possibly want with a man like me? By noon, I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to make a wrinkled polo shirt look respectable. My reflection didn't exactly scream billionaire's air. Bloodshot eyes, sleepless skin, a tired man trying to appear composed. But something in me knew this meeting wasn't one I could skip. I left early, driving my aging 2008 Honda Civic down Wilshire Boulevard, the air conditioner wheezing against the heat. The city shimmered under a cloudless sky, and for once, even the traffic couldn't drown out the noise in my head. My thoughts were a storm, questions, disbelief, and a thread of fear that maybe the old man's claim was real. By the time I reached the building, I felt completely out of place. The Whitmore, Ashford & Associates offices occupied the 12th floor of a pristine glass tower that looked more like a luxury hotel than a law firm. The lobby smelled of sandalwood and success. A receptionist greeted me with the kind of polished smile people reserve for important clients. Mr. Hutchinson? She asked. Mr. Whitmore will see you now. Her words sounded surreal. Mr. Hutchinson, as if I belonged there. The elevator opened to a hallway lined with framed magazine covers. Pharma Pioneer of the Year. The vision of Theodore Ashford. Every photo showed the same man I'd seen collapsing in the Meridian Tower lobby. Tall, confident, ageless. The difference between that commanding figure and the frail stranger I'd held days ago made my chest tighten. When I entered Lawrence Whitmore's office, the first thing I noticed was the view. The Hollywood Hills stretched endlessly beyond a wall of glass, sunlight spilling across the room. The man behind the desk rose to greet me. He looked exactly as I'd imagined, mid-60s, silver-haired, with a calmness that came from decades of winning. Mr. Hutchinson, he said warmly, shaking my hand with both of his. Please have a seat. I'm grateful you came. Honestly, I'm still not sure why I'm here, I admitted. He nodded. Understandable. This must feel sudden. But Mr. Ashford insisted that I explain everything personally. He opened a thick leather folder on his desk, carefully sliding a photograph across toward me. The picture was old, the colors faded. Early 1980s, maybe. A young woman in a graduation gown stood beside a proud man in a suit. I froze. The woman's smile, the shape of her face. I'd seen that expression in mirrors and family albums my entire life. That's my mother, I whispered. Dorothy? Yes, Lawrence said softly. Dorothy Mills, later known as Dorothy Roberts after her marriage. And the man beside her is her father, Mr. Theodore Ashford. My pulse thudded in my ears. He told me she was his daughter. I didn't believe him. Lawrence leaned back, studying my face. I assure you, Mr. Hutchinson, it's true. Dorothy was Mr. Ashford's only child. He slid another photo forward. This one showed my mother laughing beside a young man in grease-stained work clothes. My father. Robert Hutchinson, Lawrence said, as if reading my thoughts. Your parents met after college. Robert worked at a small garage in Brentwood. Mr. Ashford's car broke down one day, and Robert fixed it. Dorothy met him during that visit. They fell in love quickly. I smiled faintly, despite the shock. That sounds like Mom. She always said love doesn't wait for permission. Precisely, Lawrence said. But Theodore didn't take it well. He'd spent his life building Ashford Industries from nothing and wanted Dorothy to continue his legacy. When she chose your father instead, he saw it as betrayal. He pushed a yellowed newspaper clipping toward me, an article about Ashford's expansion in the 80s. In the photo, he looked proud, unyielding, the kind of man who didn't lose arguments. He gave her an ultimatum, Lawrence continued. The family fortune or the man she loved. Dorothy chose your father. She left the estate, changed her name legally, and cut all ties. Mr. Ashford refused contact for years, too stubborn to admit he'd gone too far. My throat tightened. So she told me they were dead, Lawrence nodded solemnly. Yes, to protect you from that side of the family, and perhaps from his pride. He reached for another file, this one filled with recent documents. After his wife passed away, Theodore began searching for Dorothy. By the time the investigators located her, she had already passed cancer 12 years prior. My voice cracked. I was 12 when she died. I didn't even know he was looking for us. Lawrence's expression softened. He found your birth certificate 5 years ago. From that moment, he kept track of you, quietly, from a distance. When he discovered you worked as a night guard, he purchased the Meridian Tower himself. I blinked. He bought the building. He did. He said if you were going to sit behind that desk, he would at least make sure the roof above you was his to give. I leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed. The man who'd collapsed in my arms was not a stranger. He was the grandfather I never knew existed. Why now? I asked quietly. Why after all this time? Lawrence hesitated, then closed the folder. Because his heart is failing, Mr. Hutchinson. The doctors say he has months, perhaps less. He wants to see you before it's too late. If I agreed to meet him, would I find answers or the ghosts my mother spent her whole life running from? The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. I followed Lawrence through the gleaming white corridors of Cedars-Sinai, my shoes squeaking softly on the tile floor. Every few steps, I caught my reflection in the glass. My uniform haircut, my calloused hands, the creases under my eyes from too many sleepless nights. I felt completely out of place in a world built for people with private wings and platinum insurance plans. When we reached room 712, Lawrence paused, placing a hand on the door. He's been waiting for you, he said gently. Take your time. The room was bright but hushed, sunlight streaming through half-closed blinds. Machines beeped steadily beside the bed where Theodore Ashford lay, propped up against crisp pillows. He looked older than he had in the lobby that night, the weight of illness tugging at his features, but his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were alert, searching. When he saw me, they softened instantly. Bradley, he said, voice rough but steady. You came. I hovered near the doorway, unsure whether to sit or run. I wasn't sure if I should, I admitted. He gestured weakly to the chair beside him. Then I'm glad you ignored that instinct. I sat, the silence between us heavy, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the heart monitor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Theodore reached for a leather-bound photo album on the bedside table. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Your mother, he said, turning the first page. There she was, Dorothy, my mother, laughing in a white sundress, her hair blowing across her face as she stood in front of a garden fountain. Another photo showed her at 16, holding a science fair ribbon. Another standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. I'd never seen any of them. My chest tightened. She was brilliant, Theodore said softly. The brightest person I ever knew. Stubborn as the day is long. She wanted to teach children, inspire them. I wanted her to carry on the business I built. We fought often. I thought I was protecting her from struggle. She thought I was trapping her in a life she didn't want. He turned another page. This one showed a young man in a mechanic's uniform. My father, Robert. He was smiling at the camera with a mixture of pride and humility. I recognized the grease on his hands, the smudge on his cheek. When she met Robert, Theodore continued, I didn't see love. I saw defiance. He was kind, honest, but I couldn't see past my arrogance. I told her she had to choose, our family or him. I swallowed hard. She chose him. She did, he said, pain flickering behind his eyes. And she was right to. He gave her a life full of love. I realized that far too late. He closed the album and looked at me, tears forming. I found out about her death 12 years after the fact. When the investigators finally tracked her down, she was already gone. Cancer. I never got to say goodbye. The lump in my throat made it hard to speak. She told me her parents died in a car crash. I guess she thought it would be easier than the truth. Theodore nodded slowly. She was protecting you from me. I don't blame her. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us lost in the shared absence of the same woman. Then Theodore cleared his throat and reached for an envelope on his bedside table. "I don't have much time left," he said, "and I don't intend to waste what's left of it." He slid the envelope toward me. Inside was a set of documents stamped with his lawyer's letterhead. My eyes scanned the bold text before my mind caught up. "Last will and testament of Theodore H. Ashford. I've updated everything," he said, his voice trembling slightly but firm. "The company, the real estate, the trusts, all of it goes to you. You're my only heir, Bradley." My hands shook. "This can't be real. I'm a security guard. I can't even pay rent on time. You're talking about billions of dollars, an empire." He smiled faintly, "And I started with nothing but a laboratory in my garage. You have something far rarer than wealth. You have integrity. That's what your mother had too." I tried to steady my breathing. "But I don't know anything about running a company." "The people around you will help. Lawrence will stay by your side. You'll learn," he said simply. Then his eyes hardened slightly. "And there's another reason I'm doing this." He leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. "I know what Donald Prescott did to you." I blinked. "You know about Natalie's father?" "I know everything. He ruined your career, manipulated your divorce, bribed a judge, and made sure your reputation was scorched beyond repair. He's been trying to buy my company for a decade. Now he'll learn what happens when someone hurts my family." He reached for the call button beside his bed. Lawrence stepped into the room as if waiting for the cue. "Tell him," Theodore said. Lawrence's expression was calm, almost too calm. "We've gathered evidence, Bradley. Bank transfers, phone records, witness statements. Enough to destroy Donald Prescott's empire and clear your name completely." I stared between them, speechless. Theodore took my hand in both of his skin cold but his grip strong. "I can't undo the years you lost. I can't give you back your mother or the time with your sons. But I can give you power, the kind that protects, not destroys." He looked me dead in the eye. "You're an Ashford, Bradley. Don't ever forget that. What does a man do when the family that broke him suddenly gives him the power to fight back?" The next few weeks passed like a dream I was scared to wake up from. Every morning I half expected a phone call telling me it had all been a mistake. But each time I opened my eyes, there was another reminder that my life had turned inside out. The sleek car in my driveway, the constant stream of lawyers and assistants calling me Mr. Hutchinson, and the quiet hum of possibility that filled the air. Theodore insisted that I shadow him at Ashford Industries. "You'll learn faster by watching," he said one morning as his driver helped him into his wheelchair. "And I want the people there to see who you are, not a replacement but blood." Walking through those glass doors for the first time felt unreal. Employees stopped mid-stride, whispering as we passed. The boardroom on the top floor overlooked the city, sunlight catching on the glass conference table. For years I'd been the man guarding lobbies like this, invisible behind a uniform. Now I was the man everyone stood up to greet. Theodore sat at the head of the table, pale but proud. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades, "this is my grandson, Bradley Hutchinson. Effective immediately, he will begin training to assume the role of CEO." The room went silent. A few faces looked surprised, others skeptical, but none dared to question him. I felt my stomach twist. CEO. I wasn't even sure how to sign the payroll forms at my last job. But when Theodore looked at me with that unwavering confidence, I forced myself to breathe and stand a little taller. After the meeting, he wheeled beside me down the hallway. "You don't have to impress them," he said quietly. "Just learn. You're here because you've survived things they couldn't imagine." I nodded, his words sinking in like sunlight through fog. "I'll try not to let you down," he smiled. "You couldn't if you tried." That night, alone in my new apartment, no longer the cramped Koreatown studio, but a place Theodore had insisted on near the company headquarters, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how fast everything had changed. 3 months earlier, I'd been eating cold noodles on a broken coffee table. Now my refrigerator was stocked by a personal assistant I didn't remember hiring. But the money didn't calm me. It terrified me. Because for the first time in years, I had something to lose again. 2 weeks later, Theodore called me into his study at the estate. He was sitting near the window, sunlight pouring over stacks of files. His oxygen tank hissed softly beside him. "It's time," he said without preamble. For you to face Donald Prescott. I froze. Face him? For what? For justice, Theodore said simply. And for your sons. I've already arranged everything with Lawrence. When I walked into the law office the next morning, Natalie was already there. She looked as perfect as ever. Every strand of hair in place, her nails gleaming a shade too expensive to name. But her confidence cracked the moment she saw me. Beside her sat her father, Donald, red-faced and furious. And across from them, calm as ever, sat Lawrence. He greeted me with a nod. Mr. Hutchinson, shall we begin? Donald leaned forward, voice sharp as broken glass. What is this circus? You drag my daughter in here to humiliate her? Lawrence didn't blink. We're here to renegotiate custody and financial terms, based on Mr. Hutchinson's new position. Natalie blinked. New position? I took a slow breath. I'm the CEO of Ashford Industries, I said. Donald's jaw slackened, the color draining from his face. That's impossible. Theodore has no heirs. He does now, Lawrence said, sliding a folder across the table. Everything is in order. Natalie's mouth opened, then closed. You're lying. I shook my head. No, Natalie. The man you've been trying to charm into selling his company for years is my grandfather, and he knows everything about what your father did. Donald slammed his hand against the table. Careful, boy. Careful? I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. You ruined my career. You bribed a judge to take my children. You think careful still applies? Lawrence's calm voice sliced through the tension. We have full documentation, Mr. Prescott, emails, wire transfers, recordings. The federal investigation is already underway. You might want to contact your legal counsel outside this room. Natalie turned to her father, her expression pale and panicked. Dad? He didn't answer. His silence said everything. I looked directly at her. I'm not here to destroy you, Natalie. I just want what's fair, time with my boys. They deserve both parents, not one who uses them as leverage. Tears welled in her eyes. Bradley, please, I stood. Theodore once told me forgiveness is stronger than revenge. I'm trying to believe that? Lawrence closed his folder. Then we're done here. As I walked out, the sunlight spilling through the hallway windows felt different. Warm, cleansing. For the first time since the divorce, I could breathe. That evening, when I pulled into Natalie's driveway in a new midnight blue Tesla, Mason and Tyler came running, shouting my name. Their laughter was the best sound I'd ever heard. Dad, is this your car? Mason asked, eyes wide. Yeah, I said, smiling. But wait till you see where we're going. For the first time in years, I was bringing my sons home, but the man who gave me that chance was running out of time. The Tesla's quiet hum filled the car as we drove through the hills toward the Breyer estate, the late afternoon sun painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Mason pressed his hands against the window, watching the gate swing open. Tyler leaned forward between the seats, eyes wide. Dad, he whispered, are we visiting someone famous? Not famous, I said with a smile, just someone important. The long driveway wound between oak trees and manicured lawns. For a moment, I remembered driving a dented Honda through rush-hour traffic to a tiny apartment that smelled of ramen noodles. Now I was here, pulling up to a mansion where history felt alive in every brick. When we stepped inside, Theodore was waiting in the grand living room. He'd insisted on dressing for the occasion. Navy blazer, silver tie, shoes polished to a mirror shine. Even in the wheelchair, he radiated presence. His eyes brightened the instant he saw us. Mason, Tyler. His voice trembled with emotion. You must be my great-grandsons. The boys glanced at me, unsure. I knelt between them. This is my grandfather, I said gently. That makes him your great-grandfather. You can call him Papa Theo. Tyler blinked up at him. We have a great-grandfather? Theodore laughed, the sound soft but genuine. You do now. And I've been waiting far too long to meet you. He handed each of them a neatly wrapped box. Inside were handmade photo albums. Pages of memories he'd assembled over the past weeks. My mother as a child, then a young woman, then a smiling new mother holding me as a baby. That's your grandmother Dorothy, Theodore explained, pointing to a photo of her on a bicycle, hair streaming behind her. She loved your dad more than all the stars in the sky, and she would have loved you both just as much. Mason flipped through the pages with fascination. She looks like you, Dad. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I said quietly. She really does. Theodore's eyes met mine, full of unspoken understanding. For a few moments there was nothing but the sound of the boys laughing as they discovered their family history for the first time. Dinner that night was unlike anything I'd known in years. The dining room glowed with candlelight. Theodore insisted on sitting at the head of the table, even though his doctor would have scolded him for it. He told stories about the early days of Ashford Industries, when he worked out of a one-room lab and used to fall asleep beside beakers of failed experiments. Mason listened, wide-eyed. "You made medicine that helps people?" "I tried," Theodore said, smiling. "That's what the company still does. But it's your dad who's going to make sure it stays that way." I nearly dropped my fork. "Papa Theo," he raised a hand. "Don't argue. You were built for more than guarding doors." After dinner, the boys explored the garden, chasing each other around the fountain while Theodore and I sat on the terrace. The air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine. He looked out at them with pride, softening every line of his face. "You know," he said quietly, "when I was your age, I thought success was about numbers. How many zeros were in your account? How many people answered your calls? But I've learned that it's about moments like this." He gestured toward the yard where Mason and Tyler laughed under the fading sunlight. "That's wealth, Bradley. And it's yours now," I stared at him. "You gave me everything. The company, the house, this life. I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," he said. "You walked through that hospital door." His words hit harder than I expected. For so long I'd carried resentment like armor, convinced the world had closed its doors to me. But sitting beside him, watching my sons run free, I realized how wrong I'd been. That night, as I tucked Mason and Tyler into their new rooms, Tyler whispered, "Dad, can we stay here forever?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "That's the plan, buddy." When I closed their doors, I found Theodore still awake in his study, poring over old letters with a glass of water beside him. He looked up, and in the lamplight I saw the exhaustion beneath his smile. "You should rest," I said. "Tomorrow's a big day. The doctors are coming." He nodded, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. "Every day's a big day now," he murmured. As I turned to leave, he added softly, "Don't waste the time we've been given, Bradley. Make it count." I didn't know it then, but the time he spoke of was shorter than any of us imagined, and fate wasn't finished testing what family really meant. The days that followed were the kind of days you wish you could bottle forever, filled with sunlight, laughter, and the comforting illusion that time wasn't running out. Theodore thrived whenever the boys were around. Every morning he'd wait in the garden before breakfast, wearing his old sun hat and a mischievous smile, ready to teach them something new. Mason learned how to care for the koi in the pond, while Tyler insisted on helping Theodore tend to his collection of bonsai trees. Their laughter became the music of the house, echoing down marble halls that had once been too quiet. He called it our routine of healing. For the boys, it was fun. For me, it was a miracle. Sometimes I'd stand in the doorway of the study, watching him show Mason how to balance a branch or explain why patience mattered more than strength. There was something holy about those moments, a sense of peace I hadn't seen in him before. But beneath that peace, I could see the truth. His hands trembled a little more each day. His voice, once firm, now carried the faint rasp of someone fighting exhaustion. Late one evening, as I walked past his room, I noticed the faint glow of the bedside lamp spilling into the hallway. I knocked softly. "Still awake, Papa Theo?" "Come in, Bradley," he said, smiling faintly. He was surrounded by papers, old photographs, handwritten notes, and the open ledger of Ashford Industries. "You're supposed to be resting," I said, pulling up a chair. He chuckled weakly. "Rest is overrated. I've wasted too many years not doing the right thing. I'm making up for it now." I looked at the documents scattered across the bed. "You've been writing letters?" "For the boys," he said. "For when they're old enough to understand who we are and the mistakes that made us human." He picked up one of the envelopes and held it out to me. "There's one for you, too." My chest tightened. "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted gently. "You're my chance to fix what pride broke." For a while, neither of us spoke. The hum of the oxygen machine filled the silence between us. "Do you regret it?" I asked quietly. "Cutting my mom off?" He exhaled slowly, the weight of his answer visible in his eyes. Every day. I thought I was protecting her from the world, but really, I was protecting myself from humility. I was too proud to admit that love is worth more than legacy. He turned toward the window, where the city lights glowed like distant constellations. You know, Bradley, I used to think power was about control. Now I realize it's about responsibility, the kind that outlives you. I felt a lump rise in my throat. You gave me more than I can ever repay, he smiled faintly. Then promise me one thing. Don't let this fortune make you forget what it felt like to have nothing. Lead with the hunger to do good, not the fear of losing it. I promise. His hand found mine. The skin was paper thin, the grip weak, but the emotion behind it was strong enough to shatter me. Good, he whispered. Then I can rest easy. The following weeks moved like a slow-motion film. Theodore grew quieter, his energy fading, though he refused to admit it. He still came to Mason's baseball games, cheering from his custom wheelchair painted in the team's colors, blue and gold. He still attended Tyler's school plays, sitting front row, bouquet in hand, eyes gleaming with pride. The boys adored him. They started calling him Papo, their own version of Papa Theo, a name that stuck. And he adored them right back, seeing in them the family he'd long believed he'd lost. One Saturday afternoon, as we watched the boys play catch in the yard, he leaned toward me and whispered, "You saved me, Bradley." I frowned. "I think you've got that backwards." He smiled weakly. "Maybe, but you gave me purpose again. And for a man who's dying, that's more valuable than medicine." That night, he didn't join us for dinner. The doctor said it was just fatigue, but deep down, I knew. His decline wasn't something anyone could stop. It was simply time collecting its debt. Before I left his room, I tucked the blanket around him. "Good night, Papo." He opened one eye and grinned. "Good night, my boy. Don't let those kids raid the cookie jar again." It was such a simple moment, an ordinary exchange between family. But it's the one I'd replay 1,000 times later. Because I didn't realize then that it was the last normal night we'd ever have. By morning, everything would change. The house that had finally felt alive was about to go silent once more. Morning came with the kind of stillness that felt wrong. No soft jazz playing from Theodore's study. No faint clink of his teacup. No hum of conversation drifting through the halls. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. At first, I thought he was still asleep. He'd been tired the night before, and his doctor said rest was the best thing for him. But when I passed his room, the door was slightly open. And something in me knew, before I even looked, that something was different. Theodore lay in bed, perfectly still, sunlight cutting through the blinds and painting golden bars across the white sheets. His expression was peaceful, almost smiling, as if he'd simply drifted into another dream. The oxygen machine was silent. The pulse monitor flatlined long ago. "Papo?" My voice came out as a whisper. No response. I stepped closer, every sound in the world fading until all I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat. I reached out and touched his hand. It was cold. The truth hit me like a physical blow. My knees gave out before I realized I'd fallen. The tears came hard and fast, unrestrained. I hadn't cried like that since my mother's funeral, but this time it was different. Back then I was a child saying goodbye to innocence. Now, I was a man saying goodbye to the person who had taught me what family really meant. When the doctor and nurse arrived, I stepped aside, numb. Lawrence appeared minutes later, face pale but calm. He didn't say a word, he didn't have to. He just placed a hand on my shoulder and nodded. The boys were still asleep upstairs. I couldn't bring myself to wake them yet. For a few precious minutes, I wanted to hold on to the illusion that their world was still whole. The memorial was held 3 days later at the Ashford estate. The guest list was small. Family, company executives, and a few of Theodore's oldest friends. The ceremony took place under the oak tree where he used to sit every morning with Mason and Tyler. I stood beside his casket, the words of the eulogy trembling on the page in my hands. "Theodore Ashford built an empire," I began, voice barely steady. But what he built in me was far greater. He gave me back my name, my dignity, and a family I thought I'd lost forever. He taught me that strength isn't found in power, it's found in forgiveness. I paused, looking up at the crowd, then at my son sitting in the front row, holding each other's hands. He used to say the hardest part of love is that it outlives us. I think that's true. But I also think love doesn't just outlive, it multiplies. Every act of kindness, every lesson, every sacrifice becomes a seed for someone else to grow. My voice broke as I looked toward the oak tree. Thank you, Papo, for everything. After the service, the crowd thinned, leaving just me, the boys, and the whisper of wind through the leaves. Mason tugged at my sleeve. Is he in heaven now, Dad? I knelt down beside him. Yeah, buddy. And I think he's probably trying to teach the angels how to run a business. Tyler smiled faintly. He said we could finish the garden with him. What'll we do now? I glanced at the patch of soil Theodore had been tending for weeks, a small area he'd called the Renewal Garden. We'll finish it for him, I said. He'd like that. That night, after putting the boys to bed, I sat alone in Theodore's study. His scent still lingered, cedarwood and old paper. On his desk lay a sealed envelope with my name written in his familiar, elegant handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dear Bradley, if you're reading this, then my time has run out and yours has truly begun. You may think I've given you a company, a fortune, or a name, but none of that matters. What I've truly given you is freedom. The freedom to choose kindness in a world that rewards cruelty, to lead without losing your humanity, and to love without fear of loss. You are my redemption, Bradley. The life I should have lived if I'd had your courage. Take care of those boys. Be the father I once failed to be. And when doubt creeps in, remember this. Blood made us family, but forgiveness made us whole. Love always, Papo. The tears came again, but this time they didn't feel like sorrow. They felt like release. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back on the desk, and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered in the distance, alive and endless. I could almost hear his voice in the wind, steady, patient, and proud. Theodore was gone, but his promise, his power, and his purpose lived on. And soon I'd have to prove I was worthy of all three. The following Monday, I returned to Ashford Industries alone. For the first time, Theodore's office door stood open, sunlight spilling across the walnut desk where he'd built an empire. His glasses rested beside an unfinished cup of tea. A single sheet of paper lay in the center, one line scrawled in his unmistakable handwriting, "Keep it human." I stood there for a long moment, the words sinking into me like a commandment. When the board assembled later that morning, the room was thick with polite tension. 12 directors sat around the massive glass table, their eyes sharp, assessing. I could almost hear their thoughts. The security guard turned air. What does he know about running a multi-billion-dollar company? Lawrence sat beside me, calm as ever, his quiet nod giving me strength. Thank you for gathering on such short notice, I began. My voice echoed slightly in the high-ceilinged boardroom. As you all know, my grandfather, Theodore Ashford, left this company, and its future, in my hands. I'm not him, and I don't intend to be, but I do know what he stood for. He built this place to help people, not to crush competition. A few of the directors exchanged glances. I pressed on. I've spent most of my life on the outside looking in. I've seen what happens when power forgets the people it's supposed to serve. That ends today, effective immediately. We're launching a review of all ongoing projects, especially pricing on our essential medications. Families can't afford the help we provide, then we're not doing our job. A murmur rippled through the room. One of the senior executives, a man named Grayson Tolliver, leaned forward. Mr. Hutchinson, with all due respect, lowering prices will impact quarterly revenue. Then we'll measure success differently, I said. Theodore Ashford didn't build this company on greed. He built it on trust. Grayson's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. When the meeting ended, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. For the first time, I wasn't just wearing someone else's legacy. I was shaping it. The weeks that followed were a blur of decisions, headlines, and learning curves steep enough to make me dizzy. Reporters called me the blue-collar heir. Some mocked me. Others romanticized the story of a security guard inheriting billions. None of them knew the truth, that I'd trade it all in a heartbeat to have one more conversation with Theodore. Every evening, I drove home early enough to have dinner with Mason and Tyler. We'd sit around the table, laughing over stories from school, their voices a grounding force in a life that was suddenly too big. One night, Mason looked up from his plate. "Dad, are you still sad about Papo?" I hesitated. "Yeah," I said honestly. "But every time I do something good, I think he's smiling somewhere." Tyler grinned. "Then he's probably smiling all the time." Their innocence healed something inside me that grief had cracked open. 2 months later, I stood again under the oak tree where we'd said goodbye to Theodore. The renewal garden had flourished, rows of bright flowers and the small marble bench we'd added bearing his favorite quote. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you lift while you're here." I sat there with a tablet in my lap, reviewing plans for the new Ashford Foundation. Its mission was simple: provide medication subsidies for families below the poverty line. For every bottle sold, one would be given away free. Theodore's motto, "Keep it human," was etched at the top of every document. As the sun dipped below the hills, my phone buzzed. Lawrence's name flashed on the screen. "How's it going, Mr. Hutchinson?" he asked, his tone light. "Better than expected," I said. "But I keep thinking of what he'd say." Lawrence chuckled softly. "He'd tell you to stop thinking and get back to work." "You're doing exactly what he hoped you would," I smiled. "Thanks, Lawrence, for everything." "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank the man who believed in you enough to give you his world." When the call ended, I looked out at the fading light and whispered, "I hope I'm doing this right, Papo." The wind rustled through the trees, scattering a few petals across the bench, and for a moment it felt like an answer. Just when I thought the storm had passed, an unexpected visitor arrived. Someone from my old life, bringing a reminder that the past never truly stays buried. It was a rainy Thursday evening when the past found me again. The sound of thunder rolled over the hills, the kind of storm Los Angeles rarely sees, and I was sitting in Theodore's old study, going through paperwork for the Foundation's first community clinic. Mason and Tyler were asleep upstairs, and for once, the house felt peaceful. Then the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was one of the night guards, but when I opened the door, the sight before me stopped me cold. It was Natalie. She stood there drenched, her designer coat clinging to her frame, mascara smudged under her eyes. The woman who had once carried herself like royalty now looked lost, fragile, human. "Bradley," she said softly. "Can I come in?" For a moment I didn't move. The air between us was heavy with too many years of pain, betrayal, and words we could never take back. But then I stepped aside. "Yeah, come in." She entered quietly, glancing around at the house. "So this is where you live now?" Her voice held no jealousy, only disbelief. "It's beautiful." I poured her a cup of tea from the pot I'd been nursing and handed it to her. "You're soaked." "You should sit," she nodded, wrapping her hands around the mug for warmth. "Thank you." For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the rain against the windows and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. Finally, she took a deep breath. "My father's been indicted," I nodded. "I know." Her eyes filled with tears. "He's facing prison, Bradley. Everything he built is gone, and I didn't know where else to go." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "You could have gone anywhere, Natalie. You still have money, friends." She laughed bitterly. "Friends disappear when your last name stops opening doors." "And the money?" "He hid most of it under his companies. The government froze everything." I said nothing. She looked at me with a mixture of shame and desperation. "I was cruel to you." "I know that." "I let him control everything. What I thought, what I said, what I did. But I never stopped caring about you, Bradley. And now I can't even look at myself in the mirror." Her words hit harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of what she'd done. But another part, one shaped by Theodore's lessons, stayed quiet. I sighed. "Do the boys know you're here?" She shook her head. "Not yet. I didn't want to confuse them. I just needed to see you first." I looked into her eyes, and for the first time I saw not the woman who'd destroyed me, but the woman who'd lost herself long before that. "Sit tight," I said. "I'll wake them." Her eyes widened. "Now?" "Now," I said simply. "They deserve to see you." Minutes later, Mason and Tyler came padding down the stairs in their pajamas. When they saw their mother, they froze. "Mama?" Tyler whispered. Natalie broke. She knelt on the floor, tears streaming down her face as she opened her arms. "Yes, sweetheart. It's me." They ran to her and she held them tight, sobbing into their shoulders. Mason's eyes flicked to me, uncertain, but I gave a small nod. He understood. When they finally went back upstairs, exhausted but smiling faintly, Natalie stood. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I did," I replied. "Because they deserve both of us, not half a family built on bitterness." She looked at me for a long time. "You really have changed," I smiled faintly. "No, I just finally had someone who showed me what forgiveness looks like." She nodded slowly, tears returning. "I'm sorry, Bradley, for everything." "I know," I said. "And I forgive you." The words left my mouth before I could think, but once they were out, I felt lighter, like I'd been holding my breath for years. She wiped her eyes and glanced around the study. "He must have been a great man." "The best," I said softly. When she left, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, the way it does after a storm, the kind of clean that makes you believe in second chances. I stood by the window long after her car disappeared down the hill, feeling the quiet settle around me again, only this time it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I looked up at the photo of Theodore above the fireplace and whispered, "You were right. Papa, forgiveness really is the strongest kind of power." The storm had passed, but life wasn't finished with its surprises yet, because sometimes the greatest gifts come long after goodbye. A full year passed before I realized that peace isn't something that just happens. It's something you build. One quiet choice at a time, Ashford Industries had changed. The marble lobby no longer felt intimidating. It felt alive. Every morning the security guards greeted me like an old friend, and I made sure to stop at the front desk, the place where everything had started. Sometimes I'd slip the night guard a coffee and grin when he tried to stand. "Sit," I'd tell him. "I know the job." The cameras won't bite. The Ashford Foundation launched its first community clinic that spring. We offered free checkups and medication to families who'd been forgotten by the system. Reporters came for the headline, but I stayed for the people. The single mothers, the retired veterans, the kids whose eyes lit up when a nurse told them they'd be okay. Every handshake felt like a prayer answered. Every smile another thread sewing the world back together. One afternoon, while reviewing new proposals, my assistant buzzed in. "Mr. Hutchinson, you have visitors." When I stepped into the lobby, I froze. It was Natalie with Mason and Tyler at her side. The boys ran toward me, shouting, "Dad!" their voices bright enough to echo through the atrium. Natalie smiled, cautious but genuine. "We were downtown," she said. "They wanted to see where you work." "Then welcome to the chaos," I joked, kneeling to hug my sons. Their backpacks thudded against my chest, a sweet reminder that real success doesn't wear a suit. It runs, laughs, and asks too many questions. Natalie glanced around. "You've built something incredible, Bradley." I shook my head. "We have. You're part of it now, if you want to be." She looked stunned. "You'd let me help?" "I'd want you to." "The boys deserve to see their parents working together for something good." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "Then count me in." That summer we held the first Ashford Day of Giving, a festival for families who'd benefited from the foundation. The courtyard overflowed with music and food trucks, kids chasing balloons, and volunteers in bright blue shirts that read, "Keep it human." The phrase had become our mission, our mantra and our promise to Theodore. I stood on the small stage with Mason and Tyler beside me. Lawrence was there too, smiling proudly from the crowd. When the microphone squealed to life, I took a deep breath. 1 year ago, I began. I was a man guarding doors, believing life had already decided who I was. Then someone opened a different kind of door for me. A door to forgiveness, to purpose, to family. This day is for him, and for everyone who's ever thought it was too late to start over. The crowd applauded, but what hit me hardest was seeing my boys clapping the loudest. Mason leaned into the mic and said, "Thank you, Papo." Laughter rippled through the audience, and in that moment I felt him there, the old man with the silver hair and sharp blue eyes. Smiling in the sunlight, after the event, I slipped away to the garden behind the stage, the renewal garden. The flowers Theodore planted bloomed in perfect rows, bright and patient. I sat on the marble bench with his quote carved into it and laid my hand over the inscription. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you lift while you're here." A warm breeze rustled the petals. I could almost hear his voice again. "Keep it human, Bradley," I smiled. "I'm trying, Papo. We all are." That evening, when the boys were asleep, I walked out onto the terrace. The city stretched below like a sea of light. Natalie joined me, 2 mugs of cocoa in hand. "They did good today," she said softly. "You did good." I looked at her and nodded. "We both did." "He'd be proud of you too." She leaned against the railing. "Do you ever miss the old life?" I thought about the tiny apartment, the sleepless nights, the fear of never seeing my sons again. Then I shook my head. No, it taught me who I am. Without that, I'd never have been ready for this. We stood there in silence, the city breathing beneath us. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured, a gentle reminder that storms still come, but they pass. And when they do, the air smells like beginning. I turned toward the house, the light spilling from the windows, the photos on the walls, the laughter echoing faintly from upstairs, and realized that for the first time in a long while, I wasn't chasing happiness. I was living it. Because sometimes life doesn't give you a second chance. It gives you a whole new story, and the courage to keep it human.